the borderlands south of Newry. For generations, bandits and smugglers have prowled these back roads out of the public eye, slinking away from the police. But only 2 minutes from here, in full view, modern lawbreakers were running a bold criminal operation. Police video tells the tale. The bandits controlled a money laundering scheme richer than anything of its kind in Ireland. They ran their crooked empire from one side of this ordinary, dull building. The other half they rented out to the local police.
There was more business in this institution than there would have been in one of the high street banks in Dundalk.
And yet it appeared to be nothing more than a local money exchange at the little border village of Dramad. There was nothing local about it. Police spent 5 years following the complex trail of money and smuggling carved out by those criminals. It led them through Europe, Asia and Africa before they unravelled its secrets. Tonight, Insight reveals those secrets. Close inspection of the books at Dramad told police tales, which they found hard to believe. Tales of drugs and of worldwide smuggling, of murder and money laundering on a gigantic scale.
Whenever we counted the monies up, in a 2.5 year period, there was $250 million turnover within the Bureau. And that was as much as the Bureau and the Central Bank of Ireland would do in 6 months.
There was a time when crime was a lot simpler. The robber could even bank his ill-gotten loot and enjoy the fringe benefits. But that's all changed. For criminals, high street banks have become no-go areas. That's because laws require banks to report suspicious cash transactions. So the crooks are forced to find other means of concealing their cash. The Bureau at Dramad filled that void, and now it fills another need, as an object lesson for the training of detectives in money laundering techniques.
The Bureau was acting as an illegal bank.
Their instructor is the police officer who led the operation north of the border to break that bank and convict its shady clientele.
All the account holders within the bank were smugglers, oil, fuel, cigarettes, milk quotas, the whole shebang, drug traffickers.
In the world of money laundering, Dramad was an industrial-strength washing machine for the proceeds of crime. Criminals brought their dirty money here, and this business cleaned it for them by hundreds of millions. September the 10th, 1997. It was the stuff of tabloids. A drug trafficker from Newry found shot to death in Drogheda. Beside him, the body of his mistress. The man was Paddy Farrell, former lorry driver, dealer in stolen cars, master criminal.
As the drugs business emerged in Northern Ireland, Paddy very quickly established importation routes to bring drugs into the country. And two men who went on to become major drug dealers in their own right worked for them. One was Paddy Doyle, currently in jail in Belgium for very serious drugs convictions, and the other, more famously known, was Brendan Speedy Fagan, who was later executed by the IRA for his drug dealing business. He was Paddy Farrell was a major figure.
Paddy Farrell was using the Bureau as more or less an unlicensed bank and a facilitator for himself for a period of about 2.5 years prior to his death.
And he was using it to deposit substantial amount of money.
He was very regular in respect of his deposits, and the records showed that he deposited the exact amount every month.
Farrell used around £5,000 a month to sweeten the local IRA leader so he could stay in the drug business. Dramad's position on the border was useful to the provisionals.
I've always said that no one in the border area could operate that type of business without some sort of authority or approval from the paramilitaries in that area.
Police files on Farrell may have been a little sketchy during his lifetime, but in death his profile grew almost daily, as Felix McKenna's team of detectives discovered.
The Bureau was being used by a large number of criminal elements situated at the border, and we learned this through the suspicious transaction reports from the high street banks, because of the Bureau itself was using banks in both North of Ireland and the South of Ireland. And the case then grew in momentum over the next 2 years.
And throughout those 2 years, the Gardaí kept the Bureau under surveillance.
We were, shall we say, gathering intelligence on the Farrell asset portfolio through in England and in America. We were also gathering intelligence on the activities of the money flows that were being generated from this unlicensed institution.
Farrell was only one of about 150 customers who dropped into the bureau regularly to deposit large sums of cash, the proceeds of crime.
Linda.
Hello, Ben.
What about you?
And like all the other account holders, Farrell had a false name, or several of them. But he wasn't just a client. Police believe that Farrell and a man named James Byrne were instrumental in creating the bureau.
When the bureau was set up, he took a back seat, therefore wasn't showing his face within the bureau. And James Byrne and his family members ran the bureau, we believe, on his behalf.
So he had someone front the business for him, in other words?
Exactly.
And he was suspected of being involved in money laundering and drug dealing?
He was, yes.
After 2 years of gathering and sharing intelligence, it was time to get ready for action.
It was time to do, as we called, a knock. That was a search operation, joint search operation, both north of Ireland and south of Ireland, and also a number of searches in England.
The date chosen for Operation Factual in the south and Operation Beaumont in the north was October the 18th, 1999. 25 premises were targeted.
There was people being ferried in by helicopters, vehicles, and it was a major joint investigation by all those agencies.
In total, there was about 300 personnel involved in the search operation, both sides of the border. The real bonus for us was that we found all of the records of Dromad, all the check stubs and all the daily records sheets in the boot of a car.
The account holders would bring in cash, that's hence £1 million in their safe, and the bureau then would transfer that money anywhere in the world for the account holders.
The laundering process was underway, and one of the destinations for the money was Holland. But the customers back in Dromad weren't investing in tulips. They had their eyes on another crop, tobacco. The Dutch customs authorities, meanwhile, had their eyes on Rotterdam. The massive container port was at the centre of a Dutch investigation into cigarette smuggling with Irish connections, including a Dundalk man, Kieran Smith. And the international web was getting even wider. Phone taps revealed that a consignment of smuggled cigarettes was on its way from Italy through Belgium to Rotterdam. Belgian custom officers took charge.
They entered the warehouse, and there they found Irish people with their hands on cigarettes who were smuggling from Italy. There the Belgian authorities seized more than 21 million cigarettes at the time.
And Kieran Smith was one of those Irishmen?
Yes.
But the Belgian authorities didn't pursue the case against Kieran Smith?
No, in that time we were working very close together, and there must be no damage further on our own investigation. And for that reason, they released Kieran Smith on our request.
Released from prison, Smith was soon back in business in Holland. His every move monitored as the authorities there tried to intercept more illegal cargo, this time in Rotterdam itself. As a result, the Dutch were able to observe Smith, another Irishman named Martin Daly, and their gang moving vast quantities of cigarettes. A company called Universal was involved.
Here in 1998 we seized by the company of Universal Warehouse 3 containers with cigarettes with a cover load of Chinese porcelain.
And the original cargo then had been replaced with the smuggled cigarettes?
Yes.
Universal proved to be a major breakthrough. During questioning, staff there revealed details of another large shipment. This time it was 18 containers with 160 million contraband cigarettes coming from Malta through Italy to Rotterdam.
The destination was a little place on the border between the Republic and Ulster.
So they were all destined for Ireland, that's
all
sure.
destined for Ireland, yeah.
The Dutch seized the cargo, but they still had no idea how the buyers actually paid for the cigarettes. And then a clue from the wiretap, one that linked the contraband directly to Dromad.
What number?
The number, I give it to you. It is 353.
Yeah.
872.
Yeah, okay. It's the bank.
Checks revealed that the telephone number was for the Dramad Bureau. By now, this multinational investigation had the financial backing of the European Union's anti-fraud unit in Brussels, and the Dutch were about to learn from the Gardaí about the two Irish smugglers they'd been tracking, Martin Daly and Kieran Smith.
Kieran Smith was the owner of a company that was based in Dundalk, a transport company, and he was identified as running that transport company. The transport company then was linked to a seizure of drugs in Castleblayney.
So Smith's drug haulage business already had the attention of the police in the south. Smith's company was on its knees financially, but you wouldn't think it if you looked at the books in Dramad.
He moved a substantial amount of money from the Bureau to various countries, and we followed that money in excess of 14 million.
To arrive at that conclusion, the police first had to decipher the coded list of Dramad account holders, aware, of course, that most used false names. To show you just how casually the Bureau regarded its clients, take a look at this ledger entry. One man making a deposit is referred to simply as Joe's mate. Deposits from people like Joe's mate were noted in the up column, withdrawals in the down. And look at that deposit, £173,000. And this is just a wee bureau de change. Little wonder the Central Bank of Ireland turned down their audacious application for a licence to operate as a bank. Eventually, the police trawl through the list of bureau regulars and come upon the name James Paul.
When we looked at James Paul, this was 14 million being moved out of the Bureau, and we looked at that closely, and we were able to connect that to Kieran Smith and Martin Daly. And then we looked closely at them, and it simply is their middle names.
The Dutch eventually tracked Daly to Turkey and had him arrested. A Turkish court extradited him to Rotterdam.
The red building over there is the courthouse of Rotterdam, and in that courthouse Martin Daly went to court, together with 6 other Dutch people.
Yes, but Kieran Smith, of course, never made it to court.
No.
Kieran Smith fled Holland to Ireland to escape capture and conviction. But as the Dutch pursued him with a warrant, he came face to face with a more ruthless form of justice.
He was lying with his hands behind his back.
Kieran Smith was kidnapped, held for 2 weeks, and then shot dead in 2001. His killer or killers have not been found.
Well, Smith, like a lot of others in that jurisdiction, had used the Bureau to actually launder their money, and that facility was made freely available to him. It kept him out of the High Street Bank, and he was avoiding the money laundering regime that exists in all the financial institutions.
This is the man who helped Smith and other criminals dispose of their dirty money, Kieran Byrne. He ran the Dramad Bureau. Byrne was convicted of operating an unlicensed bank and money laundering.
He had an asset portfolio both here in Ireland, elsewhere in the Isle of Man, and a number of other jurisdictions, including Spain. All of that profile was frozen and restrained, and we applied our revenue hat to him. So that meant that we applied revenue laws to Kieran Byrne, and we raised tax assessments against him. And he came to a settlement with us and has paid us something in the region of approximately €3.5 million.
Money laundering is complicated, but there are 3 basic steps. It starts here with dirty money, the proceeds of crimes like drug dealing or smuggling. Now, you could quite literally put that through the wash there, but it wouldn't conceal its criminal origins, would it? So when the term washing is used, it simply means you remove it from the black economy where it was acquired and transform it into some other form of asset in the mainstream economy, like property investment, travellers' checks, or a bank draft, for example. Step 2, you layer the money. In other words, you disguise where the bank draft came from and who owns it. You wring it out, so to speak, by moving it through a complex web of financial deals. Lodge it in an offshore bank account maybe, or send it through a series of stock deals covering the source with a series of shell companies that exist only on paper. Frankly, when it's done effectively, it's a lot more involved than all that. But to complicate it even further, many of the money transfers involved at this stage are done electronically, very difficult to trace. And finally, there's the third step, integration. Once the money is dried out from all that laundering, you integrate it into the legitimate economy.
They go into a business that's cash orientated, for argument's sake a petrol station or a public house. If they want to do it quickly, they must find some institution that will take a large amount of monies off them, or shall we say a rogue professional, because there is professional laundry people out there, like professional criminals who know the financial system intimately. That person will be a Mr. Clean.
But bear in mind the business. The guy has a business and he needs certain people around him to run that business. Financial investigators are specialists, and we can't train everyone as a specialist financial investigator, so it's appropriate that we give local detectives some sort of flavour of what it's about. And this scenario, although complicated, was not out of their reach to come to terms with. And that's what it was, to shove them right into the deep end and say, here's what you've got, how are you going to investigate it? It was a paper feed exercise, and they normally came up with the right answer, albeit from the wrong methodology.
These two South Armagh brothers, Raymond Mackin on the left and Kenneth Mackin on the right, were the focus of Sam Sittlington's investigation. Kenneth Mackin set up two companies, Key Mac north of the border and Key Pal south of the border. Key Mac wanted to sell Coca-Cola to Key Pal in the south.
So he brings in another broker from England, which he doesn't really need, but this other broker is a legitimate company, and this makes the whole thing look very clean. He asks the company in England to buy Coca-Cola from him in his Northern Ireland company, but he tells them, you may be buying it from me, but you won't see the goods, because I want you to sell them to my company in the south, but so that you don't have to transport them over to England and then transport them to the south of Ireland, I will transport them for you.
In other words, Kenneth Mackin was selling Coca-Cola to himself. Of course, in reality, there was no Coca-Cola to transport. The only thing moving were these false invoices to create a VAT fraud. It was just a load of gas. But important gas for the Mackins and Dramad owner Kieran Byrne. Byrne's appearance and demeanour belie the fact that he was, for a time at least, a big financier helping his criminal clients generate millions of pounds. It was Byrne who dictated how much coke the Mackins ordered from Goodness Foods in England. Sam Sittlington explained how it worked to his class of detectives. But as this preceded the court conviction, he used false names. Mr. Martin is Kenneth Mackin.
So one of the account holders was Mr. Smith. He was a tobacco smuggler. He wanted money sent out to Hong Kong. He would ring the bureau and said, I need £215,000 sent to Hong Kong. Mr. Bureau then would ring Mr. Martin and say to Mr. Martin, we need to make up £215,000 here. How many loads of Coca-Cola would that take to do that? And he will say, I'll take 15 loads. So he rings up Golden Foods in England, buy 15 loads of Coca-Cola from me, and they sell it back to Kemal. The paper sift starts, the money starts to move, and the money ends up in Mr. Martin's account, and he goes to the bank, buys a banker's draft for £215,000 and sends that off to Hong Kong.
The Mackins' fantasy Coke trail was producing more sales than the drink manufacturers needed for the whole of Ireland. To make this scam sing in perfect harmony, someone had to transport all this Coke, up to 15 containers a day. That's where this man, James Convery, had a role to play in all this make-believe. Paperwork showed he was the haulier. Mind you, at 15 containers a day, both he and Coca-Cola might have wished it was the real thing. But the only genuine part of the Coke scam was the money transferred to Goodness Foods almost every day for 2 years. It added up to a staggering £17 million in their turnover. Their share of that was £600,000. Mackin's only profit from this was on the VAT fraud. But it was a good little earner for him, and one he wanted to protect. When police searched his home, they found his escape pack, just in case he had to leave in a hurry.
He had in his briefcase his passport, his driving licence, pocket world atlas, and plenties of euro and other currency. There's £50,000 found in the house at the time.
But following the coke trail paid dividends for both the Irish and Dutch authorities. Together, Rob Van Zeep and Sam Sitlington, along with other police officers, have been able to track down cigarette smugglers and money launderers all over Europe.
It is for me the first time that I have an investigation with so many countries were involved, from customs sides or from police sides. It was for me very unique. There were a lot of common things we can link. We saw names in their records from people we know, or companies we know, or special dates we know, so that we can link that money movements to cigarette transfers in Europe or other parts of the world.
The money trail from Dromad led to the discovery of criminal enterprises throughout Europe, South Africa and Hong Kong, and has created extra work for officers like Sam Sitlington.
We have given evidence in Holland, we've given evidence in Malta on a number of occasions, and as I said, this is not just local. This is a major global disruption to money launderers and criminals worldwide.
But for all the success the police had in closing down the Dromad money laundry, they believe it's only a temporary disruption for determined criminal gangs.
Immediately, the criminals set up another institution somewhat 40 miles along the border, and that was subsequently closed down as a result of a joint operation, and people are before the court, so I cannot really discuss it. So they just move location if they need this business to actually conceal their monies and generate bank drafts.
The police know the next generation of criminals is already operating on the streets. They just hope the next generation of detectives will be ready for them.
Criminals are always trying to keep ahead of law enforcement. We're always playing catch up.
In the Republic, Kieran Byrne received a 4-year jail sentence, 1 year suspended for money laundering and running an illegal bank. In Northern Ireland, Kenneth Mackin got a 3-year suspended jail sentence for money laundering and related crimes. He was ordered to pay £500,000 compensation. His brother Raymond Mackin got a 1-year suspended jail sentence and was fined £200,000. The Phantom coke haulier James Convery was fined £500. Sentences were lighter in the north. The judge accepted a defence claim that the long delay in the case reaching court breached the defendant's human rights.